Okay, now we are good and we should be good for this entire stream. I do not intend to restart. I do not intend to test anything else. I have tested. I am good. We are Gucci. And I'm going to share this link. So I'm going to wait for some people to arrive. And then, in the meantime, I will chat a little while I do that. So I'm really happy I was able to get this set up because of how lazy I am. A lot of that setup was done today. But as long as I get it done, I'm happy. I've actually switched to OBS for this, which comes with a few advantages. One being that the horrendous connection issues that YouTube has when you stream straight from your computer to YouTube are not an issue. So that's great. If you're streaming straight to YouTube and your microphone or webcam gets disconnected or otherwise interrupted, which would often happen, things do happen, you would not be able to reconnect. And that was horrible. I hated it. And that's something that is not a problem using OBS. Another thing that you can do using OBS is, turn your webcam off, you can do that, is this. Is the slideshow. And I've made a whole slideshow for this list because I think it helps people, who maybe aren't too into movies, understand what movie is being talked about. And just helps to have a visual aid, So I have my microphone right near me here. As you can see, this is something I also was not able to do when I was streaming through YouTube because I was afraid to move the microphone. So hopefully the audio quality is very good. Still not super clear, but what are you going to do? And I think we can almost get going here. So what I have showing right now on the slideshow is a picture of my current stuff that I'm watching in Letterboxd. So this is not the list, but there are a couple movies on here from 23 that are going to be on the list. But this I felt was just a fine thing to show at the beginning of the stream, to sort of just show you guys what I've been up to movie-wise lately. There's a lot of different stuff going on here, a lot of eclectic choices, including both Gurren Lagann movies, the One Piece Monsters short, Monsters 103 Mercies Dragon Damnation, the pilot episode / film of Columbo, famous TV series, a Groot short from Disney Plus, Putney Swope, which is a movie from 1969 directed by none other than Robert Downey Sr., Robert Downey Jr.'s father, and Batman Begins, because I am rewatching that trilogy. I've never fully seen the third one. I've seen parts of it. Yeah, Batman Begins, Jack, yeah. I've seen parts of Batman Begins, I've seen parts of The Dark Knight Rises, which you may have been there when we watched some of that when I was present, I'm not sure. But I've never fully seen it, and so I'm rewatching Begins and The Dark Knight, which I've probably really only seen, I've seen Begins maybe twice before now it would be 3 times. The Dark Knight, I really think I've only seen 1 time, and then The Dark Knight Rises, it'll be my first time watching the entire thing, so. I'm doing that because I beat Arkham City recently, Batman Arkham City, the game. It's a great game, really enjoyed it. Never played it before. Even though I really liked Arkham Asylum, I played that around when it came out. And for some reason, it took me this long to play Arkham City, so what are you going to do? So, that's what I've been up to movie-wise. I've also been up to a lot of stuff game-wise, but honestly, I just kind of want to get started. The idea with this list is also that people will be able to watch this later. So I don't want there to be like too much dead air or anything. However, I do have a bit of a note to make um, about this year in movies. It's a bit of a negative note, and I try not to be too negative when it comes to art, but it is something I kind of want to highlight. So I am not one of those people who says like all movies are bad now or all movies are worse now. I don't know if I believe a thing like that. Even if, I can mathematically rank it, like let's look at all my ratings of all movies from all years and see if there's a trend. And if that trend was downward, well, I suppose I would have to admit that I believe that's true. But it's still not something that I want to talk about. Just because it's so negative and there's so many good movies that are still coming out to highlight, it doesn't really matter much to me if they're worse as a whole or if blockbusters are worse or whatever. However, something I do want to show is that 2023, in my opinion, was not that good of a year for movies. Just talking about this year and what the movies I have seen, because I can actually, I've seen them relatively recently. I can hold them in my head, in my memory, and compare to previous years. I don't believe 2023 has been very good. And I sort of want to mention this before we get started. One, to get the negativity out of the way. Two, just to, for people who do care about comparing years, set a sort of comparison. So here I have my 2019 movie list, and I'm not here to relitigate this. There's some interesting choices. Vuvu Zelen, welcome. That's good to hear, then, if you like 2023. But in my opinion, you have 15, I would say, great movies here. Pretty much all of these are great. And I would say the majority of these movies are better, I think, than every movie I've seen this year. So that's around 15 movies that are better than my number one film this year. Marco, that's what I thought. Welcome. I'm glad you guys could be here. Sorry it took me a while to get set up, but you can see the fruits of the labor here in the OBS. I hope you like my "Everyone is here" thing. It's the full banner, but I'm not going to move the webcam to show. There's 3 posters that fit together. So that's something I kind of want to just get off my chest. I wish it was a better year. There are easily chances for other movies, for other years to be better than this one and better than 2019. And there are also plenty of movies that I missed this year that I'm sure are better than plenty of these movies. But for now, let's get started with the list. We're going to be going from worst to best, as you do. And my worst movie happens to be an anime movie. I would say I kind of historically have not liked shonen franchise anime films. I think they tend to be pretty formulaic. And I don't know if I would say this one was formulaic in that way, but this one was definitely formulaic just in the way that its entire series is formulaic, and the series that it is based on is popular because it's formulaic. So who am I to judge? However, I am going to judge. My number 40 movie of the year is Black Clover, Sword of the Wizard King. This movie was in production for, I want to say, almost 3 years between announcement and release, which is a long time for an anime movie. A lot of the times when these shonen franchise movies show up, it's not that long between announcement and release. We have a couple chat messages. I watched more movies this year than any other year. That's cool. I'm happy for you. Is there any specific reason you did? You were just more into movies? And also, Jack says, last time you started low on the list and saved the worst for later. I did do that, and I remember doing that. I decided against it just because I felt that way of presenting it, of starting in the middle and then going out from both directions, might just be a little hard for some people to understand or get into who are just watching this randomly. But I did like doing that. So Black Clover seemed to have a much longer production time than a lot of other anime movies, yet had almost nothing to show for it. It is a Black Clover movie. That's what it is, for better and for worse, and largely worse, let's just say. There are only a couple movies on this list, these bottom two, that I would say I genuinely disliked. And this is one of them. Even this has its uh, good side. There are some fun characters that show up from the original series that make sure to try to fit in and focus on. And there are some cool visuals as usual. But I had a friend watch this who is just not really into, he's not a huge shonen guy so much. His taste in anime is broader than that. I am a person who reads a lot of shonen. However, I'm also not one of these people who just loves the battle shonen genre and will. I don't use the words mid or cap or blink. I don't say Black Clover clears anything. I'm not one of those kinds of people. Just So my mileage that I was going to get out of this movie was going to be varied, and it didn't end up being that much. So that's Black Clover. I don't want to spend too much time on it, so we will move on to number 39. This is a movie that I think everyone saw the writing on the wall when it was coming out, that this maybe wasn't going to be that good. And now it is uncertain, based on recent developments, if this movie is going to end up meaning anything at all in the grand scheme of things. It's unfortunate, because not only do I like Ant-Man 1, I like Ant-Man 2, which a lot of people don't like very much. I think those movies have something very nice about them that a lot of the other Marvel movies don't. They have this nice sort of low stakes feeling and a focus on these, simpler characters. And they threw all that away for this movie just to promote a villain who is admittedly pretty cool, and a villain who they may now not be using at all. And I hope they do continue to use him. I am a proponent of recasting Kang. Stick with the plan. And fix things as you go. Don't blow up the plan. Don't abandon the plan. Honestly, in my experience, when that's been done, it hasn't worked. They tried that with the DC Universe. They blew up the plan. Look what happened. So Quantumania abandons what was good about the first two Ant-Man movies to throw him into this complicated uprising plot. Not complicated, but big. And it loses a lot of what makes those two movies really good in the process. The characters, we still like them, but like many Marvel movies in Phase 5, Marvel projects, you can tell it was rewritten on the fly. You can tell the effects didn't get that much time to cook. And I mean, MODOK. What can you say about MODOK? Never has there been a more clear indicator that these Rick and Morty writers, several of which, 2 or 3 of which, Marvel has been using as of late, maybe aren't a great choice. I don't know about the Rick and Morty writers for Marvel. One of them is still writing the next Avengers, so I wish them luck. I don't remember if it was the one that wrote this movie, though. Yeah, let's just skip to the next one without actually talking about the Jonathan Majors thing. It's been talked about, whatever. Next, we have Resident Evil Death Island. I use the Japanese poster because it's got a cool visual. These movies are fine if you're a fan of Resident Evil, and I am. It's nice to see these characters as they are in the games, just doing their thing, and this is actually the first time all the main heroes have been together. But still, this movie is not very good. None of them are, Vendetta is the best one, and this one is kind of a sequel to that movie. But it's not as good as that. It's not the worst one of these either. And I would still kind of recommend it if you're a Resident Evil fan. But honestly, I don't really have much to say about it, Whatever. Next, this is a movie that has generated a ton of discussion this year, largely negative. Five Nights at Freddy's. A movie that was in production for many, many years, went through 3 or 4 directors, and finally ended up with this movie. The Jim Henson Creature Shop did the practical effects, which were mostly people in these large mascot costumes, and they look great when we get to see them, which unfortunately is not as much as we would like. Mostly the second half of the movie, they do get a fair amount of screen time, But what they don't do is really hunt anyone, kill anyone, or be generally spooky at all. And beyond that, the human character in the movie, who is played by the pretty likable Josh Hutcherson, literally spends a huge chunk of the movie's runtime sleeping. If you have not seen the movie, that sounds insane, but it's true. It is an extremely bizarre movie that I would say focused a little too much on trying to make the fans happy and did not make something that would make the general audience, or just a lot of people in general, including me, even though I wouldn't consider myself the general audience, happy. Though it did make a lot of money, probably will get a sequel, and I hope they do something else with that. Matthew Lillard is cool, he's in there. And I like Josh Hutcherson. I want him to be successful. Number 36. This is a movie I don't think either of you watching will have heard of. Hopefully some more people start watching. And it's a movie called You Hurt My Feelings. Now, there maybe over the past few years have been people who would say that movies that focus on upper middle class white people either have gone away or should go away. There are people who view that in both a positive and a negative way. I am not here to pass judgment. I'm here to say that they have not gone away, because You Hurt My Feelings came out this year. This is a movie that I think has such a narrow scope of people who are going to genuinely enjoy it. However, it is pretty enjoyable, but I wouldn't really say that I'm one of the people who could really get deep into this and really feel for the characters and love it for the kind of realistic yet kind of snappy dialogue sort of comedy that it is. People like this lady's movies. She also co-wrote that Ridley Scott movie a couple years ago, The Last Duel, with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, which is freaking bizarre. I don't see how this movie could have been anything like that one, because I haven't seen that one. But I mean, look, it's like Curb Your Enthusiasm if it was more boring, you know? And nobody wants that. Curb is coming back maybe tonight, by the way. I think it's tonight, which is super exciting. Next. Another controversial film, but also it's less controversial and more that it has generated a ton of discussion, and a lot of that discussion is negative. And it's, of course, The Flash. I say, of course, like you could predict it, but honestly, there have been plenty of movies like that this year. There are people who really hate this movie because they view it as basically a condensation of everything that is wrong with this sort of corporate filmmaking these days. I think one of the best points that's been made about it is that during this cavalcade of alternate versions of characters they show you at the end in order to make you, go, oh, I remember that. One of them is the black and white George Reeves Superman. George Reeves was an actor who killed himself partially because of the stresses of playing Superman. And here they are trotting his image out to make people smile for about a half a second. And I do see how that does not paint a good picture. However, The Flash has some pretty good emotional moments. Ezra Miller is a good actor, despite the crime spree that they have gone on over the past several years. And I admit it is bizarre how well they have been treated despite that crime spree. But it just doesn't amount to much. And it hurts because, like Quantumania, though this is more of a sure thing, it's not really going anywhere. A lot of people thought this was going to sort of explain the transition from the old DC universe to James Gunn's new DC universe, and it doesn't even do that. It's just a random movie. It doesn't have anything to do with that new universe. I mean, they just recast Supergirl, if you needed any more confirmation on that. Next, Renfield. Speaking of Rick and Morty writers, I think this movie was written and directed by a Rick and Morty writer. So this movie is substantially better than Quantumania, though. I would describe this as a live-action cartoon. It's fun, it's gruesome, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. This is definitely the point on the list where I would say I had fun watching a lot of these movies, and I had a good time generally. Um, I would say I had a good time with even everything after Quantumania, and even in theaters, Quantumania is pretty fun. But at this point, I'm going to say what I didn't like about all these movies, but I view almost all of these as worth watching. Unfortunately, one of the main reasons people would want to watch this movie, Nicolas Cage, is not in the movie as much as you want. He's good when he does show up, but he's not in it that much. I like Nicholas Hoult a lot. I like Aquafina a lot. It's got a lot of funny moments, and the final fight of Renfield versus Ben Schwartz, who's also awesome. Who doesn't like Ben Schwartz? And I really mean that. Is really great. That final fight is really funny. So if you like that cast, check out the movie. I don't think you'll be too disappointed. Something I also want to mention regarding Renfield is there is a Vampire Survivors-like video game, Renfield Bring Your Own Blood, which is actually pretty fun and continues to get updates. I haven't played it in a while, but I did spend several hours on it, and I had a good time. So, after Renfield is M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin. This movie, I feel a little bad about criticizing it, because I think when I criticize it, it's on the basis of its comparison to other M. Night movies. I would generally say I am an M. Night fan, perhaps partially because I have not seen his three worst movies after Earth, The Last Airbender, or The Happening. I have not seen any of them and probably don't really plan to. I have seen his good movies, all except Glass, which I think was somewhat divisive, but I think that maybe might have been more of an expectation thing from what I've heard. However, I like the movies I've seen by him a ton. The Sixth Sense is one of my favorite movies ever. This movie, by comparison, is just kind of like a play. It takes place in one location. It has a lot of talking. Like many Shyamalan movies, the violence is not really focused on. It's somewhere between PG-13 violence and R violence, but it's definitely restrained. And maybe it would have been a little more entertaining if it wasn't. However, it's got a good cast. Jonathan Groff, who I always like, Dave Bautista, Rupert Grint, and a couple others are very good to watch. The plot is pretty interesting, but by the end, you're kind of wishing that, like some other M. Night movies, it would have gone further. Especially compared to his last one, Old. I mean, this movie it doesn't do anything. Old is nuts. Old has stuff that I've never seen before, which is something I'm always looking for when I watch movies. Stuff I've never seen before. So this movie was never going to be good in comparison, but it is pretty good. I think it also came out almost exactly a year ago, because I saw Dave Bautista tweeting about it. Next, another movie people really hated. We have two. We have two downfall of Disney movies right next to each other here. So if you're a big Disney downfall discussion person, you're going to like this part of the list. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I don't have too much negative to say about this movie, honestly. It probably is better than Indiana Jones 4. I think the intro really was unneeded with the badly CGI de-aged Indiana Jones. But I think most of the movie is pretty good and actually still portrays Indy as very heroic and in charge, which is something obviously a lot of people, probably somewhat rightfully, feared after knowing that Phoebe Waller-Bridge was in the movie and seeing how her character is in the trailers. But Indy still gets a lot to do in this movie. He still gets mysteries to solve, bad guys to beat. And Mads Mikkelsen, I mean, not only Mads Mikkelsen, but Mads Mikkelsen with Boyd Holbrook, another huge villain actor. If you don't know Boyd Holbrook, remember his face as you watch movies, and you're going to see this dude's a villain almost every single time. He's the henchman. Mads Mikkelsen is the main villain. It's fun. It's good. Maybe a little overlong, and perhaps shouldn't have been nominated for Best Score because, I don't know, people are saying John Williams didn't really do much. I haven't looked into it myself. I'm not an expert. But overall, it was pretty good. Next is The Marvels, part 2 of the downfall of Disney duo here. There might be some more Disney movies coming up. There's at least one. And, look, The Marvels is another one where the cast is pretty good, they're pretty fun, but it really doesn't amount to much. I mean, so much has been said about how bad the villains are in Marvel movies, and I mean, the villain in this one is maybe the worst of the bunch. I've tried to remember her name in the past when she's been brought up, and I still can't. I still can't. I think of, his name is, Philaly, which is a rabbit from Watership Down. So maybe that's close. I don't know. But this movie does have Kamala Khan in it, who is good. And it does have some nice scenes of the three main characters interacting with each other. I don't know why Nick Fury has been changed to almost purely a comic relief character, especially when this movie was somewhat positioned as being a sequel to Secret Invasion, aka the worst thing Marvel Studios has ever done. But still, at least they could have followed up on it. But instead, when they had the chance to, they just totally ignore it. Where is Nick Fury's Skrull wife? Where is she? What happened to her? They left together at the end of that series. What happened to her? What about humanity hating the Skrulls and basically saying on sight for all Skrulls from now on? The US president said that. What happened? That was a big downside of this movie. Otherwise, it's just some random adventure. I don't know. It's a Phase 5 movie, okay? Next, the most recent movie I watched, only a couple days ago. Air. I wanted to watch this because I like Ben Affleck as a director, and Ben Affleck and Matt Damon is always a great pairing. Unfortunately, they did not write this movie. They, you might know, have written one of the best screenplays of all time, Good Will Hunting, and they starred in that movie as well. They didn't write this one, but Ben did direct this one. And as you can see, we have a really fun cast here with Chris Tucker, Jason Bateman, and Viola Davis. Surprisingly, Jason Bateman gets the best scene in this movie. However, it is also one of these brand biopics, which we have been seeing a lot of lately. And, these movies tend to not only show the good things, but that still doesn't mean that they're just awesome just by virtue of being about a somewhat interesting creation of a product. They're really not. So, I did like it, but, I mean, look, it's number 30. That's pretty good, right? Next up, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I picked this poster because they had this right out front of the movie theater I go to, and every time I would see it, I would instinctively think it was a Monty Python thing. If you know anything about Monty Python and the animations they use, especially if you're a little far away from this, it looks so much like one of these weird little hot air balloons that you would see that Terry Gilliam would animate. And I just always think that's funny. The movie's pretty good. It's way too long. When you think it's going to be over, it has about an hour left. But that hour still isn't that bad. And the lead performances in this are awesome. The main guy, I forgot what his name is. The main guy is great. Oh, we have people chatting. Oh, gee, thanks. Thanks, OBS, for not showing me the chats until 5 minutes ago. Okay, let me go through these chats, guys. Hold on. There's a lot that I haven't seen. IDK, okay, this is what I'm going back to. IDK, if people are getting burnt out in Marvel movies or multiverse stuff, is pushing people away. Both, I think mostly the former. Marvel fatigue, superhero fatigue. Matt Pat cameoed in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Yes, he did. Matt Damon talked about how the movie industry does not make these kinds of movies anymore. What movie was that about, Jack? Would that have been about The Flash, or You Hurt My Feelings? Okay, the Renfield guy wrote on Invincible. Shyamalan is still directing. Yes, he's directing. How many movies on this list? 40. 40 movies. I mean, you can tell it's going down. Slowly, You don't have to watch the whole thing, but thank you for watching if you do. Better than Crystal Skull? Yes, it is. Mads is cool? Yes, he is. The Marvel seemed like a fumble, sort of. I thought Wish would have been next. I have not seen Wish, and I don't plan to. I heard Secret Invasion was trash. Yes, it was. I forgot that was still going. I assume you mean Hunger Games. It sort of is, and I kind of hope it goes on for more, because this movie was good. And I am wondering, where did Matt Damon talk about You Hurt My Feelings? I didn't hear that. So getting back to the Hunger Games, I'm going to try to, let's switch to live chat on this thing. I'm looking at the chat in OBS the first time I'm doing this. I don't know why it took so long to update there. So Hunger Games, this is a prequel, and it's a good prequel. It's a villain origin story, and, the main guy, you totally buy, this descent, even when it's not that logical. And that's the mark of a good performance. I think this main guy was awesome in this movie. And it makes me want to see more stuff in this universe. The whole Hunger Games concept is good. I don't mind the PG-13 violence. I know Garglemesh in the chat, thank you for watching, by the way, I hope you're still here. That PG-13 violence really turns him off. I know you just, roll your eyes when you see that. But I don't mind it. And it just continues to be an entertaining and interesting universe. And I wouldn't mind seeing either a sequel to this or something else set in the Hunger Games, because I think the source of Suzanne Collins' ideas are good. I haven't read the books, but I would like to. So despite being almost 2 hours and 40 minutes, I liked it. Next is Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, which I don't know why they put his name in front of this. This is a movie that a lot of people would probably describe as some sort of propaganda for the U.S. Army or something of that nature. I just think it's an okay movie. Jake Gyllenhaal is a good actor. It is based on a true story, and it's a pretty interesting and emotional true story. And it doesn't overstay its welcome. It also has Anthony Starr, a.k.a. Homelander, in one of his few recent non-boys roles. His other recent non-boys role, Cobweb, is a movie that I'm a little scared to watch because it seems kind of spooky. But that's enough about The Covenant, honestly. There's not much else to say about this movie. Next, Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. This is based on one of the fake trailers from the Grindhouse movie that him and Quentin Tarantino did. And this movie is a great time. I saw this in theaters with my parents. I don't know when the last time they would have seen anything close to a slasher film in theaters would have been. So that was super fun to watch it with them. And it is just a fun and creative movie. It reuses a lot of the ideas that are shown briefly in the fake trailer from way back in 2007. And it's a good mystery. It's a good time. It doesn't skimp on the violence. And they have already announced the sequel. So I am pretty hyped for that. Eli Roth, I tend to enjoy his movies, though I haven't seen a lot of his most famous ones. I liked his family movie, The House with the Clock in Its Walls, a few years ago. That's a good one. Next up, I'm not sure how much it's known that I'm a pretty big fan of this series, so it might be kind of surprising that this is as low on my list as it is, but I have not seen the lists of other people who are fans of this series, so I don't know how high they would generally rank Saw X. Saw X is very good for a Saw movie, which admittedly, overall, are not all that great, most of them. Saw X does do a huge amount of focus on Jigsaw himself. You could use a new slasher series to replace Scream, given events. Yeah, I have not watched those recent Scream movies, but that's kind of ridiculous what's going on there, man. I can't help but kind of want to support that actress. I think she's maybe gotten, she's taken the full force of, I think, feelings that people have been having that should not be pointed at one person. Anyway, Saw X focuses fully on Jigsaw, Tobin Bell, who is fabulous. Everyone knows he's fabulous. Everyone loves him. I love him. And it's great to see him do his thing in this movie. The main issue of the movie is that by the time they actually start the game from this movie, you are like, oh my god, finally, what took so long? There is a lot of preamble to this movie. It does let you not only watch Tobin Bell act, but watch him act in ways that he hasn't really been able to act in this series. However, I would say the remedy to that is maybe just he should do more movies. Um, Something I love about this movie is that it creates a good villain for John Kramer, who is increasingly being portrayed as sort of a vigilante or hero. Um, can you hear my air conditioner? Sounds like a knocking over there. I don't know if you can hear that. Doesn't look like it going by my microphone levels. Um, and I really hope to see that villain again. Spoiler alert, they survived the movie in Saw 11, which not only has already been announced, but has, in classic Saw franchise fashion, been announced for this year. So they're going full steam on it, unfortunately using different writers than Saw 10. The Saw 10 writers, of course, also wrote what fans generally consider the worst two movies in the franchise. So maybe it's good to be switching away from them for a little bit, lest they do another bad one. Next, there's a poster here. Killers of the Flower Moon. There it is. There's the poster for Killers of the Flower Moon. Martin Scorsese's movie from this year. I watched this whole 3.5 hour thing. Maybe it's not 3.5. Maybe it's like 3:20 or 10 in theaters without going to the bathroom. That's crazy. What's also crazy, but not quite as crazy, is the fact that Lily Gladstone is getting so much credit and nominations for acting in this movie when, unfortunately, she doesn't get much to do. It's not her fault. She's very good when she does show up. She really does not get much to do in this movie. That's the main point of discussion that I want to have about this movie, because it's the thing that's generated the most discussion is her performance. Saw should quit while it's ahead. Maybe it should. I'm glad it came back for one more good one. And I am kind of greedy in that I want to see where they can take it from here, but once Tobin Bell is done with the franchise, I think maybe it should be put to bed. So, Killers of the Flower Moon. It's nice that Scorsese does not take anything from anyone and says my movies are going to be as long as they're going to be the way I want them to be, and that's that. However, that also means that since Wolf of Wall Street, they haven't really been all that good. This movie has a lot put into it, a lot of care, a lot of advising from, the Osage people who are portrayed in the film. And, clearly just has a lot going into it from the actors, directors, every aspect of the crew. But still, it could have been an hour shorter and it would have been way better. You could have consolidated all that stuff. It's nice when Brendan Fraser shows up for like one scene as like this crazy like southern showboaty lawyer, and he's really good. Just he started yelling in the courtroom all of a sudden. That was fun. It also has one of the funnier moments in any movie this year, and it is not the scene where Robert De Niro spanks Leonardo DiCaprio with a wooden paddle. That's not the scene I'm talking about. I won't spoil what I'm talking about, but you may know when you see it. It's later in the movie, I'll say that. One of the funnier moments of any movie this year. The books are nastier. For Hunger Games, Gargamesh, yeah, I guess obviously, because they actually allow you to, imagine it. So next is another long movie, The Creator. This movie ends like 3 different times. However, all the endings are good. Gareth Edwards, I think that's the right Gareth I'm talking about, right? Edwards is the right one. He is good. Rogue One is my second favorite modern Star Wars project under Andor, which is a spin-off of Rogue One. And Gareth Edwards is just a master of special effects. He does these things for budgets that are so low, it's crazy. This movie is no exception. There's a lot of really great backgrounds and other effects in this. However, this movie tackles AI in a way that I found so bizarre to watch in 2023, where people have almost said the direct opposite of this. The way the creator looks at AI has almost nothing to do with what people are actually thinking about AI-wise this year or in the future. The portrayal of AI in this movie is very similar to Ex Machina, where it's what if you made a person who thought like a person and they were a robot? What would you think of that? That has nothing to do with what we actually use AI for, what the questions around AI actually are right now. It has nothing to do with any of that. And so I felt a little odd watching this movie. I'm not the kind of guy who's just going to say, I didn't like this movie because I reject the premise. That's not what I'm saying, but in a sense, the timing that this movie came out and what I maybe expected from it were upset a little by the actual content, which made it kind of a weird viewing. However, there is some very creative stuff in this movie. Allison Janney plays one of the villains. She's very good. And it's got a good ending. Next up, Wonka. I saw this with my parents around New Year's, and they loved this movie. So did most audiences, it seems. I still don't really like the idea of turning Willy Wonka into a franchise, period. I don't know if he should be the focus of his own movie. I don't know if Timothée Chalamet was the right choice to play young Wonka. The original 1960s movie is one of my favorites. But I will say that this movie at least does have a lot of respect for that film and does not simply try to trot out a lot of what it did for the member berries. It's a pretty competent musical film in its own way. And, you know, when you see people enjoying it, like I saw my parents enjoying this and talking about it afterwards, it makes you like a movie a little more, even if you weren't such a huge fan of it yourself. So that's why it's at number 23. We are almost getting into the top 20 here. Next, I watched this with Garblemesh here. Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. This is basically Guardians of the Galaxy if it was in the Dungeons & Dragons world. And I've thought a lot about a potential idea that is a fantasy Guardians of the Galaxy type thing. And so it was interesting to watch this movie and sort of compare it to my own thoughts on that idea. This is pretty good. I'm not entirely sure what I would say it could have done better. You know, it feels very much like a Marvel movie, but it also feels like a good Marvel movie. So what the heck, you know? Look at this cast. You got Chris Pine, who's great. You got Hugh Grant, who's great. You got Justice Smith, who is always good. You got Michelle Rodriguez, who's there, as always. Sorry, Michelle. She tries her best. You got Sophia Lillis, who we haven't really seen since the It movies, so it's nice to see her again. And you have some really fun special effects, many of which are practical. And you have a couple awesome sequences. There's this sequence with the painting that is probably one of the most creative things I saw in a 2023 movie. I'm sure a lot of other people agree. And yes, having played a Dungeons & Dragons campaign once, I don't really plan to do it again, though I do miss my character a little bit. It does feel like a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, as a lot of people have been saying. Guardians of the Galaxy is basically the last of the great Marvel films. Well, you'll see where it shows up on this list. So that's Dungeons & Dragons. It's a fun one. Next up, another fun one, Tetris. This was a movie I had been looking forward to actually for a very long time, just because I found it really interesting that they were adapting the real story of the quote-unquote Tetris Wars for the rights in various places in the world and for various different consoles and computers. And I could tell before this came out that it was going to really stretch the truth of things, which it does. However, it's still a very competently made movie that is never boring. And, you know, despite really going kind of nuts with stretching things, also never veers off into entirely unrealistic and gets a lot of the important points correct. So I had a good time with it. The way it portrays the Game Boy as some sort of incredible scientific event is really freaking funny. There's a scene where they have the Game Boy under a sheet and they pull it up and say, "We call it the Game Boy." And the main character's like, it's really funny. So some of it is silly in that regard. But overall, it's a good time, and I mean, you can tell by the placement on this list. It's almost made the top 20. I did enjoy it. Um, Another thing, what I want to say, something they did not cover, perhaps for the better, is about this guy that was a figure in the early days of Tetris, who I think he owned a building or a section of the college where the creators worked, where a lot of people were playing Tetris, and he was like, "You guys got to stop playing Tetris because you can't focus." And then later he moved to America and killed his wife and son, and then killed himself, which some have called the Tetris murders. Maybe it's for the better that they didn't cover that part of the Tetris story. Movies that go over real events stretch the truth often, just like the one for Facebook. Yes, they do, and yeah, it's not always a bad thing, but you do have to be a little restrained with it. You know, you don't want to go too crazy, and there's a lot in this movie that they just make up. You know, you can tell, but especially if you do know the real story. Next is a documentary, I think the only doc on this list, the only actual doc on this list, which is Stan Lee. The reason why this movie is so high, this is absolutely a puff piece. Like let's be real, this is a puff piece, and it's especially a puff piece for the same reason that it's good, which is that almost all the narration in the film is by Stan Lee himself. I believe not AI. I believe it is taken from actual recordings. I am not sure from where. I probably should have looked it up before now, but I'm pretty sure it's not AI. And it's really neat to hear him describe his entire career and his relationships with all these people. However, yes, the Kirby estate does not look too kindly upon this film, but watched as it is, and knowing that, it's a very good look at this man's entire career. A legendary figure who I think, yeah, he had his issues, but I think, he deserves a lot of the praise. And this is really nice to watch. I'm not exactly one of those Stan Lee worshippers, but still, really nice to watch. And that's my number 20. So we're about to get into the movies that are, maybe a cut above, you know what I mean? But I don't know if we're quite there yet. We have a few more to get through maybe before we're at that point. So next is the highest Disney movie on this list, Elemental. As I expected, this was the only one to get nominated for an Oscar because Disney, insanely, often the winner of the Best Animated Feature category, even when they don't deserve to be, Disney did not have a chance in hell of getting nominated this year if it was not for this movie. It's fun. The characters are likable. It has a more, I don't know what to say, it has a more relatable feeling than a lot of Pixar movies. And the plot, of course they have to ratchet things up near the end. It still doesn't feel ridiculous how they do it. They don't suddenly introduce some crazy villain. And Disney has issues with villains lately. So I liked it. What can I say? Beautiful looking film. Not as good as a lot of recent Pixar, but it's Disney's best thing this year. So there you go. Next, The Venture Brothers. Radiant is the Blood of the Baboon Heart. Great title, great poster. This placement on the list, I will admit, may be slightly honorary. I have not thought too much about this movie since I watched it. However, it is very hard to quantify what Venture Brothers means to me. I've been following this series since, I would say, its second season, which is 2002, 3. And it's almost impossible to quantify what something like that means to you. The Venture Brothers is especially a series that a lot of its fans, I think, have a weird relationship with because it would be gone for periods of 2 to 3 years before coming back for 3 hours of combined content and then leaving for another 2 or 3 years. However, this show had such a unique vibe and such a unique trajectory and such a unique style of writing that I think was unique when it started, but was co-opted by, I think, so many things. The Venture Bros was sort of almost always a good version of Joss Whedon style writing. And I think that influenced a lot. And it's very sad to see it go, especially because they plan to do a lot more with the content that ended up being this movie, and they were not able to do a full 8th season. But I am glad they got to do the film, and it was very bittersweet to watch. Next up, we are getting to number 17, Suzume. Makoto Shinkai is a director who I have never really been able to fully embrace in the way that I, at one point, fully embraced Mamoru Hosoda, even though he also has kind of fallen out of favor. Makoto Shinkai, I believe, Jack and Marco, is a guy that your friend group also is just generally not a big fan of. But there are plenty of anime fans who are still big fans of him. They love his general thing, and he absolutely does have a general thing, which he has even said after the release of this movie that he was getting tired of. He said he wants to stop doing boy meets girl stuff. And yes, Makoto, please stop doing boy meets girl stuff. I would love it if you went back to doing something that is fully supernatural instead of this sort of mix of realism with supernatural elements. Because his most supernatural series, Children Who Chase Lost Voices, is my favorite movie of his. Suzume, however, is number 17. It is good. It is a good time. It has a living chair in the movie that's great. It toddles around. They bought a real chair to the Golden Globes where it got nominated, and they had Harrison Ford hold the chair. I should have put that picture in here, but I didn't. And Suzume is still a good time. Visually stunning, as Shinkai's works always are. However, I'm tired of the thing, Shinkai. I'm tired of his thing. Do a new thing, dude. Okay? For all of us. Number 16. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Or as it is known now, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Because audiences hate Part 1. They hate Part 1, man. Don't call your movie that. Audiences do not like it. There's a reason Dune did not do that. Dune was just Dune when it dropped. Avengers Infinity War was just Avengers Infinity War. Justice League, which never had a part 2, was just Justice League. But they were supposed to have a part 2. However, this movie is good. All the recent Mission Impossible movies are good. This movie does way better than the creator in actually addressing the conversations about AI that people are having right now in 2023. This movie being a part 1 is its quality is going to be contingent on what its part 2 does. There is a character they kill off in this film who a lot of people didn't like that they did that. I also didn't really like that they did that. However, it also has Mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy, which is pretty cool. And it's got a cool new villain. 2 cool new villains if you count the AI. And, Mission Impossible, man, those movies are just, there's always, like you used to be able to expect from the MCU, you could really expect a bar to be set by these movies that they've never gone under in a long time. Even Mission Impossible 2, I think, is pretty cool. I watched it a few months ago. Gargamesh, they talk about Stripperella. You might be a little behind, which is fine if you want to watch the whole thing. I appreciate that. But I'm just glad I can tell what you're talking about. In the Stanley documentary, no, they do not talk about Stripperella, unfortunately. So Mission Impossible, it, I think, suffered just from a kind of audience fatigue that it is unfortunately not really at fault of. I think, the box office was somewhat overstuffed at that time. I think people were maybe looking for something new. And, it dropped before Barbenheimer, but I almost feel like Barbenheimer being on the horizon may have hurt this movie a little bit. And that's part of why they're going to drop the part 2 from the next one. It'll just be called its own thing, even though it will still be the same movie. I think most of it has been shot. And I will be there, because these movies are always good. Top 15, let's go. Speaking of Barbenheimer, which one is this going to be? Any guesses? Come on. If you know me even a little bit, you're probably going to know which part it is. It is the Barb part. This is Barbie, which is a largely likable film, especially once the plot really gets going. listen, I do think America Ferrera's speech was a little bit much, and I would generally describe a lot of this movie as a bummer. However, I don't hold anything against this movie for trying to say what it's trying to say. Movies can do plenty of that. Movies can put forth views that even the creators of the movies don't agree with, and they should be allowed to do that. So I'm not going to fault a movie just for trying to say one thing or another, unless that thing is really abhorrent, which even like, you know, the most right-wing filmmaker, I don't know. It's no one's watching the movies that are actually saying abhorrent shit. Let's just say that. There are filmmakers who lean right-wing that do make movies. Michael Bay is probably one of them. Even his movies probably don't really say much that's actually awful. Anyway, Barbie, it's a good time. I really like Ken. I like his whole arc. I think, the movie maybe could have made him out to be, it turns him into the villain, and that's a little sad to see. Part of why the movie's a bummer. However, he also has a really nice ending. And, oh, excuse me, hold on. Frozen, are we frozen? How do I not be frozen anymore? Guys, how do I not be frozen? Hold on. I'm trying to turn it off and on. Keep it here for a while. This is a podcast now. I saw a little bit earlier with OBS, and I don't really get it. I don't know why it's doing that, but still frozen. So it's a movie that I am conflicted about. Speaking of conflict, literally the main conflict is solved by the girls being emotionally manipulative. That is kind of a funny way to put it. There are a lot of great jokes in this movie that, are pushing against, certain, things guys do. The stuff about, oh, I suddenly care about the Snyder Cut. Some of that's really funny. So, it's like, despite the movie being a bummer, there's also so much to love about it. The performances are great. The writing, one of the co-writers was a man, by the way. I don't know how many people actually even know that. Is really good. The production design is incredible when they're in Barbie Land. And, this movie was a sensation for a reason. People were really hyping it up before it released. If it was not good, people would not have gone back to the theater week after week after week to see it. But they did, and that's for a reason. Still frozen. Okay, next up. This is a movie we discussed a little bit about, Vuvuzela, a couple weeks ago. No, we didn't. Wait, here it is. Hey, this is the actual number 14. Beau is Afraid. Man, it would be this stream could be going better, but it also could be going worse. This movie, despite it having this sort of, silly, dark parody sort of thing going on that you might think I would really love, I didn't really love those parts all that much. What I actually loved was the final act of this movie where he confronts his mom. I think it is maybe some of the best stuff in any movie this year, even though this is only number 14. And, it's a fabulous showcase of acting and bizarre happenings, and just the actual final finale of this is so nuts. However, the first two acts of this movie are overlong and don't do much aside from being this weird kind of dark parody, which has diminishing returns the more kind of weird, jokey thingies that you see. It's less funny for me, I think we're still talking about Barbie, because it was a great opportunity to make the hostile social environment between male and female to promote empathy between genders and communities. And you think that it sort of made it more hostile. Yeah. Instead it plays into stereotypes more in a negative way. I think it does, and that's why the movie is a bummer. I don't know if I would say it intended to do that as much as it does. Like I said, one of the co-writers was a man. I really think they did attempt to end the movie in a good place for everyone involved. But then also at the end of the movie, after everything is resolved, you get a scene with America Ferrera's husband, who is like this weird, like weakling, like ineffective dummy, and it's like, oh, we're just doing more of this, even though we resolved the plot, and it was kind of nice for Ken. Okay, all right, I guess so. So I get what you're saying in that regard. Beau's Afraid. Do I have anything else to say about it? It's the first and possibly only Ari Aster movie I will ever see because his other two movies seem like way too much for me. I don't want to see them. Always nice to see Joaquin. I mean, come on, you know? You could tell he was loving doing this one. Next up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mutant Mayhem. This one was a little out of order for some reason. I know William, who I don't think is in the chat right now. I'm sure he will watch this at some point. I think he really liked this movie, and I maybe didn't like it as much as he did, but I for sure really liked it. It's, my number 13. What's so good? What's so good? Anyway, this movie is so fun. Visually, it's really cool. The voice acting is great. It's sort of how I said in my review is it's anchored on one end by Jackie Chan and anchored on the other end by Ice Cube, who are both incredible. But it's really the main cast that makes the movie, who are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they are so good. Another thing I said in my Letterboxd review is that I don't think it's a coincidence that improv comedy is mentioned several times in this movie and even shown during the credits. I think a lot of this movie, or at least more than most animated films, probably was improvised in the booth. And, the process of doing that must have been really interesting. It's not something I've read about. It's not something I actually know how much it was actually done, but it feels a lot like a lot of this movie must have been improv. And if it wasn't improv, that's also super impressive. You know what I mean? I am very excited for a sequel to this. This movie really endears you to pretty much all its characters. Paul Rudd, especially, is like so funny as this dude who is just like up for anything. He's just a pal. And he's so freaking funny. I didn't even really know it was him until the credits. This movie is such a great time, and I'm glad I saw it in theaters. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are like, they're great, those guys. Like, they are so good at like all the shit they touch. They're kind of the creators of The Boys, even though the showrunners of The Boys is not either of them. They're still heavily involved in that show, and they were heavily involved in this movie. And man, those guys are great as a writing creative team. Next up, this movie made me racist against humans. Yeah, see that, Barbie could never, right? Barbie could never make you racist against anything. Number 12. Not this. Number 12, The Boy and the Heron. Hey, I'm still frozen, guys. That kind of sucks, but honestly, I don't think there's a way to... I'm trying to figure out what I would do. Hold on, guys. Because the webcam isn't even displaying as like being, which is what's troubling me. Maybe if I put it into another USB. Yeah, you missed Botalk, yeah. Because I just can't waste time trying to fix this because it's just tanks the whole stream. Sorry, hold on. There. Now it's like this stream never involved me. That was just a hallucination. Yeah, Boy and the Heron. I picked this poster because this is all anyone knew about this movie forever. And it's a really interesting poster. It really makes you think, why is there an eye in this bird's mouth? This guy does not look nearly as cool as this when we actually see him in the movie. But I did watch the dub of this, and Robert Pattinson does super well as this character. He's sort of doing a almost Willem Dafoe type voice, and Dafoe is in this movie a little bit, not much at all, but he is in it. And yeah, Boy and the Heron, look, Miyazaki is very unique, and his movies are always going to be very unique. This movie is very dreamlike, and it clearly is very meaningful to the people that made it, but it doesn't amount to all that much, especially for a Miyazaki movie, who I really do think he's made a lot of great films, some of which I haven't even seen. I know what you said about the movie making you racist. I know. It was funny. And yeah, it's like, I don't know if it's because he's old. I don't know what it was. But the movie just feels like kind of a dream a kid has to get over his mom dying. And by the way, how weird is it that the movie itself is like looking down on this kid for not being okay with his dad rebounding off his dead mom with her sister that looks just like her? What kid would be okay with that? Give him a break. He doesn't need to go on a whole adventure to learn and be cool with that. Just give him some time, man. Hot damn. No, Gargamesh, it is not worse than Tales of Earthsea. Tales of Earthsea is still substantially worse than this film. Though it has a better Willem Dafoe performance. That's what you're into. So that aspect is something that, it doesn't matter all that much in the grand scheme of this film, but it's still really funny to mention. Next up, number 11. We're almost in the top 10, folks. Unfortunately, this movie, which is a combo of one of my favorite directors with one of my favorite actors, did not make it into the top 10. David Fincher's The Killer. This is a really cool movie. However, just due to the way it is set up and its pacing and its writing, it just isn't as intense or interesting as most of Fincher's movies. Same with Fassbender's performance. He can only be so interesting when he's doing this type of character. However, there is a lot to like about this movie, and I do like a lot about it. The script still is really good. Fassbender still is really good for doing what he is able to do in this film. And the guest stars, when they show up, some of whom are known, some of whom are not as known, are also very good. It comes off as a very realistic sort of movie, almost like something Craig Zoller would have made, if you know who that is. I alluded to him earlier when I mentioned right-wing filmmakers, but I stopped short of mentioning him then. I'm mentioning him now just to compare this to the sort of verisimilitude, let's say, of one of his movies. But then it's sort of heightened by the narration, which is one of the most interesting aspects of, comparing what this guy says in the narration to what he actually does is really interesting. And so I did really like this movie. However, it did not make my top 10. Let's turn the webcam on again and see. There he is. Here. Oh, yeah. No. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay. We're back. We're back, baby. Okay. So, we're in the top 10 now. And my top 10, you're going to get a kick out of this one, Gargamesh. I'm not sure if you're fully caught up, but if you are, you're going to get a kick out of this one. This is a movie that was not just disliked by Gargamesh in the chat, but was also disliked by many people who were fans of this guy's previous movies. For a lot of people, even people who were totally okay with this guy making movies that looked the same, were paced the same, were acted the same, every time the bloom has still kind of been off the rose for people when it comes to Wes Anderson and Asteroid City. But guess what? I did like this movie. It's my number 10. I think it's substantially better than the last one Wes Anderson did, which was The French Dispatch, which was more of an anthology thing. I like this one a lot. I think it was really interesting. I think even if I did not fully understand it, I think it had a lot to say, and I do think it was saying it, even though I didn't understand it too much. I don't think it was just putting shit out there and throwing stuff at the wall. Yeah, good guess, Marco. You did guess it. Did you like this movie? I'm wondering. Because it's also just a freaking great time, man. It's Wes Anderson doing his thing. And I don't care if he's doing it for the 20th time, which is soon to be not that much of an exaggeration. I feel like he must almost be over 10 if he's not already. Um, and Jason Schwartzman is still great. They're a great team. Scarlett is such a great fit for Wes. He's never worked with her before. She's a great fit. All the guest stars are really fun. The song that the little kid sings about the alien with the cowboys. I mean, come on, man. You don't have to be so mean to it. It's pretty good. You can't wake up if you don't fall asleep. Yeah, what does that mean, guys? Any ideas? Any ideas what that meant? We can get back to it. I'll continue with the list. We can get back to it if there are any ideas. Not the last Willem Dafoe movie on this list, of course. So, yeah, more cerebral and meta. I would agree with that, and I think that's neat. And a lot of people didn't seem to be into it. Next, we have a movie that has been lauded to high heaven by both fans of this franchise and non-fans of this franchise. Did I say franchise? I guess that kind of makes sense. Maybe that's what they should call them. Gargamesh says, my issue isn't him doing the same thing. My issue is his movies that don't have a central character and are just little vignettes are bad and boring. You do think that that's kind of what this movie is? I mean, it certainly does have a lot of characters, but I do think it spins a pretty good focus around the Jason Schwartzman character. I do think Tom Hanks could have been in it a little more, though. It's weird that he's Tom Hanks, and yet it feels like he's not really in it that much. Also, never worked with Wes before. So next, the most beloved movie of the year, I would say, is coming up next. I am a fan of this franchise. However, I'm not obsessed with almost anything. Okay, so like this is a franchise that especially a lot of the fans of it are obsessed with it, and they have all the merch and shit. I would only even come close to obsessed with like a couple things, like Zatch Bell, Gorillaz, One Piece. You know, like, and even then, I have like a few bits of merch. Like, I'm not a merch guy. This is a merch franchise. Listen, let's just go to the freaking movie, okay? It's Godzilla Minus One. All right? Enough preamble. Okay? Wait, Sam, have you not seen... Sorry, I don't know if I was supposed to call you by your real name, but I doubt you'd mind. Have you not seen Asteroid City? Because I totally thought you had. That's why I was alluding to you before I even started talking about it. Maybe I was just thinking about how you generally have not been a fan of Wes lately. Godzilla Minus One is a really freaking good movie. It's my number 9 movie, but it is really good, as is every movie in the top 10. The way this movie acts as, I would say, a version/response to both the original 1954 Godzilla and 2016 Shin Godzilla is really interesting, and it manages to differentiate itself in its own way as well. I love Godzilla in this movie. Compared to both of those other movies I mentioned, Godzilla in this movie is a thinking Godzilla. You can tell he has his own goals. And you can tell he is extremely angry at people for mutating him into what he is now. And the story of this main character, who's played by an actor I've seen before in a few things, among others, the JoJo Part 4 movie where he plays Koichi, my favorite JoJo character, which he's very good in. The story of this character is so touching, you know? And that, more than anything, is what has really attached people to this movie. They finally got the humans right in Godzilla. It took them only like 75 years, but they finally got it right. Jack says, I watched twice in theaters. Did you watch the black and white version? Because that did seem cool. I didn't catch it. I'll catch it if it ever gets a home release, which I'm sure it will. But I did see it in IMAX, and I had a great time. There was something towards the end. So much has been talked about it. Like many people, I do think that was a little weird. However, it makes sense for the movie to end. on a more optimistic note. And frankly, some people might heavily disagree with this. I would not mind at all if they made a whole Godzilla franchise out of this. After Shin Godzilla, Toho said they intended to do their own cinematic universe. And I want them to do it. And they can start with this, because I like this Godzilla a lot. I would say, spoiler, he sort of dies in this movie, but it's implied that he's going to regenerate. Have him regenerate as a version where the atomic breath is less insane, okay? And then he can start fighting some other monsters and, being a force of nature instead of being pissed at everyone. And maybe it'll be cool, okay? Just stay the course, keep the humans good, keep it paced right. It could work out. Right now, I think Takashi Yamazaki probably is going to be writing a sequel to this. I don't know if that will be the start of a cinematic universe, but I'm sure it would be good. I really wonder if it would focus on the characters from this or use a new set of characters, since the characters from this have been through enough, let's face it. I also really like the logo to this that has the G that looks like Godzilla. That's pretty cool. My next movie, speaking of Shin Godzilla, and speaking of reboots of long-running tokusatsu franchises, is Shin Kamen Rider. I forget if this came out in 2023 in Japan, but it did come out in 2023 in the US, and that is what actually matters to this list, is if it became available to watch in my country this year. Shin Kamen Rider is so freaking good. It is a movie that jams so much into it that, like another movie later, a couple spots up on this list, it is extremely fast-paced, which some would say is maybe a negative. However, it also means that it is never, ever boring. And this movie just covers so much. It has so many fun little moments. And it is very different from Shin Godzilla. I would say the Shin movies are they're a progression of like more realistic to less realistic, where going from Shin Godzilla through Shin Ultraman to Shin Kamen Rider, there's a progression of it kind of getting wackier. Shin Ultraman is sort of in the middle of the two. This movie is just totally nuts. However, it also brings the drama at the most random times and is also the only Shin film that I would say really evokes Evangelion in a lot of ways. And, people who are fans of Anno and fans of Evangelion might really want some Evangelion vibes from the Shin film. Shin Godzilla, of course, has Evangelion vibes in its destruction, but I wouldn't say it has those vibes in all that much else, except maybe there's bureaucracy in Evangelion too, I suppose. This movie, however, has a lot of Evangelion-type stuff. Its hero is basically Shinji, and there is something in the movie that is also very akin to human instrumentality. This movie is like watching, 5 or 6 episodes of a TV show in quick succession, and it's a little disjointed because of that. That might be the thing I would levy against it the most. But it is not afraid to kill people. That's something that I think a lot of people want to see movies like that these days. And it is very emotional and has effects that go between pretty great practical effects and also insanely silly CGI stuff throughout the film. It's a good time, guys. Y'all should watch it. It deserves to be number 8 here. Number 7, The Holdovers. I'm wondering if Marco or Jack, if you guys have seen this movie, because this is really good. Maybe the best script of the year. I don't know how good a judge I am of that, but I would say, I haven't read Oppenheimer's script, which is like all in first person or whatever. That obviously is still yet to come on this list. But I would say The Holdovers may be the best script of the entire year. And this triumvirate here of characters are so likable. You feel so much empathy for them. And yet the movie is also super funny in plenty of places. It's that kind of movie. You kind of know what it's going to be when you start it. You're going to laugh. You're going to feel emotional. And you know what? By the end of this movie, these 3 disparate personalities are all going to have learned a little something about each other. I tell you what. Okay? And you will like watching it. Even if you've seen movies like this before, you will like watching it. It has been the acting roles in this for both the lead male and the lead lady on the right there. They have been awards darlings, and you will probably see them win at the Oscars as well. Next up, this is a movie that could potentially, if I was to rewatch some of these, drop in this list. This is a franchise I would not say I am a huge fan of. I got into it later than a lot of other people did. However, I did feel that this movie, as an epically long, like just thrill ride, worked. But a big reason why it worked is because it positions itself as a finale, okay? And if it turns out later on that it is not a finale, that is going to make this movie quite a bit worse, I would say, just if that happens. And that's almost definitely going to happen. So if this movie doesn't drop simply because I would rewatch other movies around it again, this is John Wick 4, by the way, if you didn't know, then this movie could easily watch just because the franchise continues in a way I don't want it to. However, I feel this movie is really cool for what it is. It has some really great creative sequences, as the franchise always does. But I don't know if it's that much better than John Wick 3. Just you could tell they really put their whole freaking thing into this one, man. They really put everything into this, and it makes sense that like I think the main creative people might kind of be stepping back from the franchise after this. Bill Skarsgård is a great villain in this. He's super fun. Everyone loved the Top Gun shotgun scene. Yes, that was. Did I say Top Gun shotgun scene? The top down shotgun scene. Yeah, that was really cool. But I think it's all I have to say about John Wick. I mean, look, some of it's really dumb, right? He gets thrown out windows. He gets kicked down a really, really long flight of stairs, and it's like, John, you have like 30 seconds to get back up these stairs, and then he somehow does it, even though it took him like over 2 minutes the first time. And oh, that's a good thing to mention, Jack. Yes, rest in peace, Lance Reddick. I had a feeling going into this movie that his character was going to die. And, obviously they did that before he really sadly passed away in real life. He was such a great actor. He was always great to watch, even in stuff that overall is not very good, like the Resident Evil show on Netflix. And I am really going to miss him. It's just going to be hard to know that he's not going to be in anything else, And I know that might sound like a little callous, like he was a person, why are you looking at him as just an actor? But like that's how we interface with him as a person, is through his acting. You know what I mean? So it's that's how we see him. So obviously that's what I'm gonna miss. Next up, I'm biased towards my number 5 here. I think if it were any higher than this, it would be super ridiculous. I think as it is now, it's only kind of ridiculous and okay considering the bias I have. I mentioned that there are a few things earlier that I am obsessed with. I did not mention this, and I would maybe not mention this because, like I said, I'm not really obsessed with anything. And I also don't have too much merch for this franchise. However, there are a couple posters behind me right now. In the video is now a picture that are part of this franchise. It's the Super Mario Brothers movie. I really wanted to use the awesome teaser poster here because this is the poster that started to validate the optimism that I've always had regarding this movie. Always, 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 always. Ever since it was first announced that Miyamoto was involved in it. And it was from when this poster dropped, but really from when like the second trailer dropped, which is a while after this poster. But things I think were still starting to percolate when this dropped, that maybe this movie will be good. And the movie has issues. I mentioned earlier, this is the movie I was talking about when I mentioned that this movie is so fast-paced. It's ridiculously fast-paced. It could have been a half hour longer and better for it. However, that means the movie is never boring and barely gives you any time to like even think of anything that it does wrong because it's so fast-paced. I think it's got a great cast. Yes, of course, Jack Black is maybe the best part of it, but everyone is very good at it. Why is my phone ringing? Um, so I think seeing the Mario world rendered in this way, and also seeing, sort of the Miyamoto approved backstory for Mario, which sort of draws on elements that have been used in the character's backstory in many different interpretations, and sort of seeing now having that be not set in stone, but in a way, sort of, you know, understood as like this is kind of the backstory we accept for Mario is really cool. Um, so that was awesome to see. And I think they did a really good job of setting that backstory for him and Luigi. And I mean, onwards and upwards. Like, let's go full steam on the sequel. Let's go full steam on other Nintendo films. Live action Zelda, let's freaking go. Yes, it probably should have been animated. Still, I trust Miyamoto. I trust that he knows what's right for these characters. And we got a good Mario movie in 2023, so it's going at number 5, y'all. Take a drink of water here. We're almost at the top 3. Thank you everyone who has watched this far. We are going up in an hour and a half now for the stream, which to be honest is about what I expected. So we are going to number 4. We got the Barb. Now we got the Heimer, the Enheimer, okay? Because this is Oppenheimer. I really, really like this movie. I have almost always been a Christopher Nolan fan. I know not everyone in this chat is. Nolan has gotten so much backlash over the years, some of it for good reason. However, his movies are almost always awesome and extremely entertaining. This one is no different. Going into this movie, I was not sure I would like it. It's a long movie. It is a realistic film, and I do kind of tend to prefer movies that are a little bit, honestly, if that's the only thing that's coming from me after this long talking, we should be very thankful for that. If I'm not coughing and like making weird ass noises with my throat and stuff after this long talking, that's a fabulous occurrence. Hey, Amber, welcome. Good to see you. So as I was saying about Oppenheimer, I tend to prefer movies that are a little out there, movies that are at the very least heightened versions of reality, like you might see in, say, a Paul Thomas Anderson film. He's doing a new one with Leo. That's super exciting. And you will see that represented in my top 3. I don't know if anyone have any guesses on what my top 3 are after this. But I did have a really good time with Oppenheimer. The beginning of this movie is so nuts in only a way that Christopher Nolan would do with a realistic film, where the first 15 minutes of this movie feels like a 15-minute trailer. And it's crazy. It jumps back and forth, the narration, the visuals, it is so crazy to watch. And then the movie sort of settles down, but it never really settles. It still jumps back and forth, still does a lot. And it's just really freaking good. Especially at the latter part of this movie where they go into the trials of kind of both Oppenheimer and Lewis Strauss, who's played really well by Robert Downey Jr. I know a certain film pundit that a couple of us here follow, Grace Randolph, was not a fan of Downey in this movie. But even though his awards wins this year might be somewhat honorary more than they are based on, him being the best, I think he still really did a great job in this movie. And I mean, the cavalcade of stars in this movie just as a whole is insane. Casey Affleck, I don't frankly know if he needed to be one of them after he was Me Too'd, but still, that's part of what makes this movie so entertaining. Josh Peck is in this freaking movie. He's like the guy who presses the button on the nuclear bomb is Josh. And overall, it's Christopher Nolan kind of doing what he does super well, just putting together a movie in this, fascinating way where you can tell every single aspect has been looked over. And man, that's part of what makes me like this guy. Like, you can tell he's kind of a perfectionist in a way where maybe people on his sets probably don't have the greatest time. And I hope, he's not too mean to them. I don't think he is, but they absolutely come out with great movies. I think if anyone's too much of an asshole, then it's not worth it to make a great movie. I doubt he's that much of an asshole. If he is, he should stop making movies. But for now, most of what we're seeing is the film. We don't really know what it's like behind the scenes fully. And this film is great. It's my number 4. Moving on to number 3. Another drink. We are now past an hour and a half, so this stream is now a movie length. Sort of fitting. Yes, Marco. Number 3 is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I used a Japanese poster for this because I thought it was really cool. I'm actually going to make this a little bigger. If you're wondering, Amber, the webcam is the webcam's frozen, unfortunately. So I'm just I had the poster as my head. Posters are as my head for a while. So Spider-Verse, I've always had a bit of a complex relationship with, where some of the elements of it I wasn't quite as into as other people. However, it's almost impossible to deny how good the movies are. And to be honest, I would say almost like the first third or maybe even first half of this movie was it took me a bit to sort of get into it. I think it's good to have a lot of that buildup, and I think especially when taken as 2 movies, which once again, this is only a part 1, I think that buildup is going to come off a lot better when viewed as only a quarter of like a full story instead of a half of a full story. But the second half of this is, like I said about Beau is Afraid, just some of the best stuff of this year. The way this ratchets the tension up, and the conversation between these characters, between Miguel, who's been super popular, and Miles, and these other characters, and the ending of Gwen's story. I mean, oh man, like that. Let's talk about heart wrenching, And I mean, having like one of my favorite character actors in recent years, God, why am I blanking on his name right now? Who plays Gwen's dad? He's so freaking good, and he always plays cops. Sorry, let me check real quick because I have it pulled up right on my phone. I'm gonna check who this is. This movie has a big cast, but I know he's gonna be right in. Shea Wiggum, thank you, Shea Wiggum, who voices Gwen's dad. He always plays cops, always. And so, seeing that he played a cop in this also was super funny. But I mean, that scene near the finale was so good, and it was really surprising. Like, you don't really expect it to go the way it's gonna go. The finale of the movie does go the way you expect, but that doesn't make it any less kind of scary for Miles as a character. So I mean, the second half of this movie is just like pretty much obliterates any problems that I might have had with the first half. And so Amber says it's paced differently for sure. The kiddos in my life didn't have the attention span for this one, but I thought there was some very gorgeous scenes and really good emotional punches. Yes, I have also heard that kids have not liked this movie too much. I think what I heard was that there was a kid who was very disappointed with it only being half of the story. And I understand that too. And yes, there's something to be said that maybe a Spider-Man movie should appeal to kids a little more, but also the filmmakers should be able to do what they want. And I am really interested to see how the story is going to end. I'm not sure if I'm going to like the third movie of this more than I like the second half of this movie, but it is cool that we are now going to see some of the characters from the original who were not really in this one come back, including Nick Cage. And I think this movie stands pretty tall as my number 3. So my number 2 in this list, I have thought a lot about. And frankly, I am sort of glad that it is not number 1. I think it is in the shadow of this franchise it's a part of, and that it should and I am taking it as its own thing. It should be taken as its own thing. But not only am I a little afraid of being judged by people, but it also just does not admittedly feel like a number one of the year movie. Like I said, 2023 generally has not been all that good of a year for movies. And yeah, this one probably shouldn't be that high. However, similar to how a Mario movie is special to me, this movie is special to me for different reasons. It's a series I have emotionally invested in, made by a filmmaker who I have emotionally invested in, and that ended up being a good choice, though it may have not been a good choice, because this guy almost did not get to make this movie. Things were really up in the air. It seemed like this movie was not going to happen the way we wanted it to, the way James Gunn wanted it to, okay? But it did. It did happen. We got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And I'll also admit, like I will with Spider-Verse, the first third of this is not all that good. The orgoscope stuff is kind of weak. It's mostly just like a few comedic moments and then at the end a fake out death that is like immediately reversed. And it's at that point I was wondering, like, am I going to be able to feel this way about this movie like I do about the other Guardians movies? But then you get to the later like 2/3 or the later half of this movie, and it is so freaking good. It is like James Gunn at his absolute best blockbuster filmmaking. The combination of emotions, exciting set pieces, great makeup and practical effects, which unfortunately were not nominated. I think this might have been nominated for visual. I don't remember, but it should have been nominated for makeup because there was a ton of great makeup in this. It's got the first F word in the MCU. It's got a fabulous ending that some people had issues with. I personally did not really. Though it was obviously sad, it's sort of bittersweet for sure to see things, are not going to be the same as they were. But things can't be the same as they were because James Gunn has left the MCU and he's on to bigger. And I'll say it, hopefully better things. It wouldn't hurt me to see his DC stuff be better than this. Please, let him do the best work possible. And I hope Warner Brothers likes it as much as we do so they don't, can it after one or two movies. No, it didn't get makeup. I'm wondering if it got just general special effects, though. So, yeah, this movie does have kind of a rocky start, but the later parts are so strong, and they service every single character. And, I mean, like Amber says, that Rocket backstory, I don't think anyone really expected this to be what it was. I did not, my parents both like these movies. I did not mention this aspect to them before they saw the movie, because my mom is a huge animal lover and she would not have even wanted to see it. And it definitely did kind of rip her heart out, but I was like, it's necessary. That's what I was thinking, I was like a villain. I was like, it needs to be done for the good. So my mom can see this movie and that she needs to go through this. I'm sorry. It's got to be this way. And yeah, that's just an example of how Marvel lets James Gunn do what he wants to do in a way that they probably don't really let other people do what they want to do. I hate to say it. Marvel has not been good lately. Like, let's be real. It's not something I really want to go into that much. But yeah, I mean, Rocket's backstory is one of the aspects that make this movie great. I think everything is just like immaculately written in paste once they get to the High Evolutionaries version of Earth. And the finale is great, and that final sequence, I mean, who doesn't love a good single-shot hallway fight, or any combination of those two things, right? Maybe it'll get old at some point, probably not yet, right? What else is there to say about Guardians 3? This movie, the first one especially, which still might be my favorite of the three, is super special to me. It feels and does this kind of filmmaking in a way that I don't really know if it has like ever been done as good, or if it has been done as good, it really, has not been done as good that often. And like you can take your cool dark superhero films like Logan, like yes, of course that shit is really great. But like Guardians 1, it reminded me of like One Piece in a way. I remember seeing it in 2014 and going like this like reminded me of One Piece in like the best possible way. And like I was talking earlier about how I've had ideas that resemble Guardians and like I want them to resemble Guardians because like why would you not want to have something resemble that? And you know, like I said about Dungeons and Dragons as well, I think this movie has largely set a template for like this style of like bringing the team together and you know the sort of Marvel tone that yes Josh Whedon did kind of start, but I think James Gunn sort of perfected in that way. I don't know how much there is to say about Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I'm so glad it was released and directed and written by James Gunn in the way that he wanted it to be. But, like I said earlier, I am also kind of glad that it is not number one, because there could only be one number one. And it might change if I see more movies from 2023. But for now, it is a movie that is going to get a lot of awards buzz, already has, won a ton of stuff. A movie that does take place in a very weird version of our reality, which I mentioned previously that I liked. A movie that does have Willem Dafoe, who has been mentioned a lot in this stream already. A movie directed by one of my favorite modern directors. It's Poor Things. That is my number one movie of the year. Thank you to everyone who watched this stream so far. I'm glad it didn't go totally awfully, even if my webcam did freeze. Poor Things is a movie that combines its tones in such a great way. I'm not going to say that every joke landed. And there are some movies that maybe I would see that I would be like, this movie is freaking perfect. It's better than Poor Things. But honestly, I barely think any movies are perfect. It's hard for a movie to have every joke land with me. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not going to hold that against it. It's better than any other movie I've seen this year. And aside from the fact that some jokes didn't land, I don't really have much else that's negative to say about it. I think it is a movie that has this great balance of sort of a violent and volatile sense of humor, but also has sympathy for a lot of its characters, even the assholes, you know, even Mark Ruffalo. This movie has an incredible score which just like abandons all pretense and just goes like full soaring at some point, just like soaring dramatic like trailer music at some points. Emma Stone is so good, especially early in the movie. You kind of forget that it's her, I would say. This movie also has Cyril Karn's mother from Andor in it, which is totally awesome. I was like, I saw her in the trailer for this. I was like, that's Cyril Karn's mom from Andor. She's in this freaking movie. Are you kidding me? It's got Christopher Abbott in it, who is a great, I don't know, I maybe kind of say he's an up-and-comer, because it takes years to fully come up in Hollywood nowadays. It has Willem Dafoe, who is fabulous as always. And it's got, you know, such a great cast. You can see them all standing there under Emma Stone and under this, I believe it's a fireplace from the movie. They turned it into this weird thing. The production design in this movie is incredible. The settings in this movie are incredible. I wanted to see more of it. From what I understand, the book does not really take you too deep into that either. But just the story of this person and this woman who is sort of finding her own way in this world, which is like ours but not like ours, is just so consistently entertaining, so funny, so emotional sometimes, so bizarre. Definitely watch it, Marco. Let me know what you think of it. Because Yorgos is such a great director, man. He did The Favorite, he did The Killing of a Sacred Deer, he did The Lobster, all great, great movies. The only one I haven't seen by him is Dogtooth, which I think was his first one, and I really have to see that. But he is so freaking good. Him and Emma Stone are already working on a third film together, which I can't wait. And I mean, with a cast like this and a director like this, you really can't go wrong. I love that Yorgos has gone out of, you know, a more realistic style for what's been done with this film. finally there is, production design and setting to match the way his dialogue has always been and the way his characters have always acted. And it's so good to see that happen. And I hope he continues with it. He's a guy who could maybe use a little bit more of a Wes Anderson sort of visual flair of his own making. So that's it. I think that's all I have to say. So thank you everyone for watching. There you go. So thank you to everyone for watching this. Even if I said it hasn't been an awesome year for movies, it still had a lot of great movies in it, and certainly ones that are worthy of discussion. So I'm really glad that so many people came here to watch me discuss them, and also presented some really interesting points in the chat, which I am very glad that I was able to respond to a lot of you for this. Here's looking forward to 2024. Doom Part 2 is coming, baby. I am excited. And hopefully around this time next year, I think normally it makes sense to me to sort of have January to catch up on movies that I missed in the last, that came out the last year. So probably around this time next year, I will be doing a stream like this again. And it will hopefully go better without any tech issues. And I'm also going to be using OBS for like all my upcoming streams, which I think is really going to be a great thing for my Zatch Bell 2, discussing videos. It ended with Poor Thing, so 2023 wasn't too bad. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And that's why I wanted to put that in the beginning of the video. So, because I don't like being negative in general. I it's a silly thing, but like, I'll be negative when I need to be, and there's plenty of times in this stream where I have been. But I like being positive, and I like lauding what deserves to be lauded about movies that are great. And I love movies as a whole. So once again, thank you to everyone who watched. And maybe it's a blessing in disguise that the webcam froze, because it might take me a bit to figure out how to stop streaming on OBS, but I don't think it will. So thanks to everyone who watched. Please have a good night. If you are watching this later on, please comment on your thoughts on my list, or let me know your own list. The list is on Letterboxd. I will link it in the description. So that is that. Thank you all.